Salut tout le monde! Welcome back to Unintentionally Frenchified with your favorite Franco-American host, Kate. I am super excited for this week's video, which is my reaction to Emily in Paris Season 2. This series made quite the buzz when it premiered last year. So if you haven't seen my reaction to the first season, I would highly recommend checking it out here because it's a very different reaction than the season 2. If you haven't managed to catch this series yet, it is basically a series about an American girl from the Midwest who comes to Paris, basically my life 11 years ago, and it's all about her discovering the French way of living, working in France, the culture shocks, the stereotypes. However, she does it wearing 10-inch stilettos, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. But in any case, I found season 2 to actually be a lot more realistic and have a lot more genuine stereotypes and culture shocks that you really can encounter living in France. And so I'm going to talk to you today about the 7 culture shock stereotypes that I think that Emily in Paris got on point this season. I cannot wait to hear in the comments what other people think about season 2 and especially what you think about season 1 versus season 2. If you have not subscribed for the channel yet, you know what to do. Otherwise, c'est parti. I had to start the #1 point off with speaking French for Emily in Paris. I talk about this all the time in my videos, and I was really surprised in the first season that we didn't see a lot of Emily in classes actually trying to speak French. And in this second season, you see Emily struggling to speak French a lot, and you hear her speaking French a lot in the series. I've said from day one that learning to speak French in Paris is very complicated because so many people do speak English, but then at the same time, it's very difficult to integrate 100% in society and especially at work if you don't speak French. And Emily starts to see this in the series. First, we see her speaking a lot of French in her classes. We see her actually going to classes. Then we see her not being able to lead an account at work because she's not able to speak French and conduct the meetings in French. We see her getting corrected when she speaks French, which I think is a really important thing to keep in mind because in France, people are super direct. They love if you try to speak French, but they cringe when you butcher their language, and so you get corrected by people all the time. All of this seemed way more realistic to me in season 2 than this perfectionist girl that arrives in France and is pretty like blasé about her classes and is just going to be smoothly integrating into France without actually having to put in the work to learn the language. Not gonna happen. If you're a foreigner living in France, or you're about to move to France, and your French is a bit more Emily than you'd like to admit, then I highly recommend Lingoda. If you don't know Lingoda, they are the #1 online learning language school, which means that technically you're not going to meet a beautiful Englishman or English woman like Emily did sitting next to you physically in class, but classes are super convenient. They are online 24/7 when it's convenient for you. You can learn from your pajamas. It is amazing. On top of that, something that Emily really could have benefited from in season 1, they're also about to launch their language sprint that starts February 11th. If you haven't heard of the Lingoda Language Sprint, let me give you a couple of details about it. So basically, you're challenged to sign up for 15 or 30 classes a month. And these could actually not just be French, they could be Spanish, they could be German, they could be English, they have a couple of different languages. And if you commit to your number of classes a month, then once you've finished, if you take all of those classes, then you're eligible for up to 50% or 100% cash back. So not only is it quite the deal, as long as you commit and stick to it, but it also accelerates your learning and boosts your confidence massively. I could have really used this type of sprint when I was first learning French in France. So I don't have the best accent in French. If you've seen any of my videos speaking French, you know that that's not a strong point of mine. And I was just really shy about speaking, so I wasn't improving my accent a lot. And I kept saying to people, merci beaucoup. So when you say thank you very much in French, it's merci beaucoup. And when you say merci beaucoup, you come across as saying thank you hot ass instead of thank you very much. mortifying. And if I had been speaking more and practicing my accent more, maybe one of my teachers or somebody else would have corrected me before I had said that to more than a couple of people. And one of the best things about Lingoda is they have small class sizes, certified teachers that are native speaking teachers that are leading the classes, and they force you to talk. So you see a lot of progress really quickly. Okay, so I'm gonna move on from sharing embarrassing stories and telling you about Lingoda, but sign up ends on February 1st. So if you wanna be one of the over 40,000 people that have already participated in a Lingoda language sprint starting on February, please go sign up. You'll find my discount code in the YouTube description. It gives you 20 euros off your sign up fee, and you also find the link to sign up with all of the different information. So the second thing I loved about this season was all of the references to the lack of air conditioning in Paris in the summer. Like Mindy and Emily were blowing themselves with a hairdryer with cold air trying to cool off in their apartment, or they're like opening up the refrigerator door and like sticking part of their body in it and like closing it. Who is guilty of doing that? Me. Honestly, growing up, when you grow up with air conditioning and then you don't have it, it is a really rough transition to get used to being so hot in summer all the time. And my favorite part is like Emily telling her colleagues like, oh my gosh, why don't we have air conditioning in the office? And they're like, first of all, bad for the environment, and secondly, you don't want to catch a cold. Lol. The French are terrified of catching a cold and think that anytime they get a sniffle, it is due to the fact that their neck is like uncovered. And so there's this obsession with always like wearing a scarf or like having a turtleneck or something. I swear the French are probably buying up like 90% of the world's like turtleneck shirts around, because they really, leaving your neck uncovered is a no-no in France. And like sitting next to air conditioning while it blows on you or like a fan is like a no-no. That is how you are going to get a summer cold. Watch out. The work-life balance also had me dying. No, Emily, we don't work on weekends. No, Emily, stop sending emails on weekends. No, Emily, don't make your life about work. It was obviously done in a very exaggerated way, but it is the gosh darn truth. The French normally have a brilliant work-life balance. They have a minimum of 5 weeks of vacation per year, and they work to live. And by living, I mean enjoying their time off, spending time with family, taking vacation, seeing friends. The Americans fail enormously at this, and so it was so nice to see them putting a huge emphasis on work-life balance. Even if it was a bit exaggerated, when you think that France was one of the top 10 countries in 2020, one of the top 10 richest countries in 2020, yet they still managed to take off, literally pretty much shut down the entire country in the month of August so everybody can enjoy vacation with friends and family. You know they're doing something right. I love you, France. The nudity scene in the sauna was also hilarious and pretty true. Basically, Emily gets invited to go with Camille and all of her French girlfriends to spend, an afternoon in the sauna in the hammam, and all of the girls are topless. And Emily's quite uncomfortable, like sitting there keeping her robe on, and I was dying because not only is Emily American, so therefore America is way more prude when it comes to nudity than the French, but then on top of that, she's from the Midwest, and like the Midwest in the US is probably considered like the most wholesome part of the US, and there definitely is not a moment in Emily's life in Chicago where she was hanging out with her girlfriends topless. So I thought this was pretty funny. And then during the actual series, like they weren't trying to like strategically cover the women's like breasts or nipples or make sure you couldn't see anything. Like the girls were full on topless and doing the entire scene, and we could see all of their breasts. And I felt like that as well had quite a touch of French to it, because the French don't really shy away from nudity on screen or off. And in the US, normally things are kind of blurred, or they're not, I don't know, I felt more authentically French than I thought that it would. Fifth point, the French saying no to say no. There were a couple of moments in season 2 where Sylvie was just kind of saying no to Emily about things almost like in an unlogical way, or Emily wasn't really understanding and it wasn't really clear why Sylvie was saying no. Welcome to France, Emily. The French's first reaction is very often no. No, it's too complicated. No, I can't do that. No, I don't know where it is. No, it's definitely not possible. No, for sure we don't have those raspberries, even though you can see the raspberries right behind me that you want. No, 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 no. Everything starts with a no, and then in France, you just need to push back. No, but please. No, really, I think so. Go and have a look. I swear my letter's there. And you push back, and eventually you can get to your yes. In the US, it doesn't work that way. Usually people say yes right away. You know, customer is king. You get more with honey than you do with vinegar. You know, all of these phrases to say the nicer you are, the more than you can get. Not the case in France. You get more by being pushy and debating well, and I feel like they portrayed this a lot better in season 2. And then finally you have Mindy, which is Emily's BFF in the series, and she has a new love interest this season, much like Emily, named Benoit. And there were 2 things with Benoit that struck me as completely French and something that I'd seen as a culture shock when I first came. First off, the hardcore makeout sessions in public. At one point in the series, you've got Mindy and Benoit, and they're laying together in a park, spread out on a blanket, and all of a sudden they start making out, and then she's rolling on top of them, vice versa. And it was this moment where I said, oh yeah, that's absolutely France. Because when I first arrived to France, I was surprised to see it doesn't really matter the age. It's not just like the horny teenagers. You can see, you know, adults, you can see grandparents, you can see, you know, anybody that feels like it in these like very passionate, intimate lock and lip session. And it's not really like maybe the prude like smacks you might see in the US, but people are just a lot more comfortable, you know, as I said, with like nudity. They're also a lot more comfortable with a bit of, you know, intimate sexual moments. You know, I'm not saying that anyone's going super far, but a little makeout session in the park is nothing to look twice at. And then the second thing that Benoit did that made me go, okay, this is pretty much France, is he said, you know, he's a songwriter, and he had his favorite teacher that told him that he should probably stop writing songs, and he said that really unmotivated me. And when I first arrived to France, I was a teaching assistant in schools, and throughout my last 11 years here, I really felt like the education system in France is a lot harsher than the US. So in the US, we're like full of optimism to students, and you know, like you can be whoever you want to be as long as you try hard and reach for the moon, because if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And it's all of these things about pumping kids up and making them feel bigger and better than they actually are. And in France, I would say it's the opposite. It's a lot more about being very realistic and almost, sometimes I feel like crushing. I don't know that the French would say it's crushing, but really, you know, telling kids like, that's not where you should be, you're not good enough at this, try harder. You know, in the US we can get A's and A+ because we did something perfectly. The French system is done on notes of like 20 out of 20. Nobody gets a 20 out of 20. Nobody can be that perfect. I mean, passing is a 10 out of 20. You should be like really happy if you get a 15 out of 20. Like 18 out of 20 is close to almost being unheard of. You know, it's very much, they don't overinflate things and they don't over-optimize things. And so his favorite teacher told him like, don't be a songwriter, don't follow your dreams. That's not, you know, you might not pass the bac at 18 if you spend too much time on that. It's just a very different way of education, and I thought that was a really solid point to make in the series. All right, everyone, so these are what I thought were the 7 most realistic culture shocks or stereotypes that I really saw when I first arrived in France that they portrayed in season 2 of Emily in Paris. Now, I cannot wait to hear in the comments about what you guys thought about this series, if you've already seen it. And obviously, do not forget, if you're interested in the Lingoda language sprint, you can find all of the information in the YouTube description below, and you can get your discount code to get 20 euros off. Have a fabulous week, everybody, and I will see you la semaine prochaine. Bisous!